Next Curve.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Next Curve's reThink podcast, where we break down the latest tech and industry events and happenings in the world of semiconductors and Karl's favorite topic, AI, and AI, into the insights that matter. And I'm Leonard, Lee, executive analyst at Next Curve, and I'm joined by the illustrious Karl Freund of Cambrian AI Research. And we also have an agentically modified and augmented Jim McGregor of the famed and infamous and fantabulous, right? That's another good word to describe Tirius Research. Yes, Tirius Research. Welcome, gentlemen.
This is not the Jim McGregor you're looking for. No, just kidding.
Yeah, you're in a purple metaverse. And so, in this episode, we're gonna of Silicon Futures, we're gonna be talking about the headlines for the month of May, which has been completely insane. And before we get started, remember to like, share, react, and comment on this episode. Also, subscribe here on YouTube and Buzzsprout to listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Opinions and statement by my wonderful guests here are their own and don't reflect mine or those of Next Curve. We're doing this, for informational purposes only, to provide an open forum for discussion and debate on all things AI and silicon. So with that, wow, guys, it's just, this is like really nutty. It's getting out of control.
You say that every month.
I know.
That's the new norm.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with, I'm going to kick us off here with this announcement by Qualcomm. I'd love to get your reactions to this. They announced that, or they didn't announce, there's this report from Bloomberg that mystery hyperscaler that Qualcomm mentioned on their earnings call this month is ByteDance. And looks like there is an alleged deal for quote unquote millions of ASICs to support AI requirements for their social platform, right? So this is largely inference, right? Agentic AI. So what do you guys think? Is this?
I think it's finally happened. I mean, Qualcomm's been in AI on the device for a long time. 8 years in production, I think, maybe 9.
Oh yeah.
And they dabbled in the data center. It got some ODM traction with Dell and HP with the Qualcomm AI 100, but it was really underpowered for today's AI. It was designed for yesterday's AI. Now Qualcomm has what we all believe they will announce probably next week at COMPUTEX. The next generation of that, which is rack scale. And if you want to start fresh with new AI models for agentic AI and a lot of CPU power, that seems to be where they're heading. And ByteDance fit.
Well, and they showed off their first rack scale solution at Mobile World Congress. It's a huge rack. It is a standard.
Tall. Right.
But it's really tall. It's standard than what I would consider a normal rack, but it is an industry standard still. So no, it's going to be interesting. First off, they've kind of hinted that they're talking to more than one hyperscaler or more than one large customer. So I would expect that this is probably the first in many announcements, and they planned on making their first announcement about their first customer at their their investor day, which is later in June. So this is kind of leaking, I think, the first announcement. But I'm also a little concerned because this also kind of puts them on the government radar. They could very easily all of a sudden be pulled into some of those geopolitics that Nvidia and AMD have been pulled into. I'm hoping that's not the case, because I really hope that we get rid of some of those geopolitical issues. But I think it's a great, if it is true, I think it's a great win for Qualcomm.
Did they announce where this would be stood up?
They have not, and that's
I was
the
wondering if
interesting part
maybe
of
they're
it.
going to do like Singapore or something like that that would allow them to perhaps sidestep government intervention. Don't know.
Well, so
Well,
here's where I think
the government already opened up the prospect of selling H200s and AMD
That's true.
products, but the Chinese government has said absolutely not. We don't want them in the country.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And I
we'll
think
see
a
what
lot of the
Yeah.
happens.
policies are geared more toward concerns around foundation model training versus inference, right?
True.
And the
Yeah.
systems are different. And if you recall, when they first started the U.S. first started the bans, and Nvidia introduced H20, they couldn't fit those chips. They couldn't package HBM into them, right? And so the memory content is different. So I think the whole, let's call it, security control policies might have to evolve if inference is as much of a concern as foundation model training. And if you read some reports, H100 is great for model training. And so where does that put the older generation GPUs, right? And those can fall under the radar, or at least the current one, right? From a policy perspective. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess the bigger question for me is, what do they mean by ASIC? And is it MPU, or is it going to be a custom job? That was the thing that I thought was a head scratcher from the announcement. But I just assumed
It
that
is interesting because Qualcomm has indicated that they are interested in doing custom
custom.
CPUs and custom accelerators. So and that they hope to be doing both.
Yeah.
So it could be one or it could be
Or
one or
both.
both. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was an interesting announcement. And then, of course, I think the other one that caused quite a stir this week was Huawei's 1.4 nanometer Kirin chip, or at least it's been characterized as 1.4 nanometer in the headlines. But that's a claim that they might be able to achieve an equivalent, if you will, in 2031 or something like that. But Jim, what were your impressions of that?
I take all of that with a grain of salt at this point in time. I still think that they're going to be limited on how far they can go with their current lithography technology, and they're still going to be several years behind at best. Even with that, and especially not having EUV and high NA. So it's going to be a challenge. But with that said, they are a very innovative company. They continue to find ways to be competitive, and they always have.
Yeah.
So, even if they go to electron beam or some other technology, I'm sure that they will come up with something that's going to at least fit their needs and make them competitive in the marketplace. And you have to remember that Huawei's not selling to they're not going to be selling these chips to the global market. They're going to be selling
Yeah,
it
for
to
their
in China, and they're going to be using it themselves, selling it in China to other vendors and a select other countries. So it's
yeah.
not necessarily a global competitor to what we already have from the Western companies.
Yeah. I mean, the government's made it a little bit easier for them and their compatriots to have a competitive platform in a country where there's really no outside competition coming in, right?
Mm.
And so, I think the bar is lowered. However, sounds like they are making good progress
Yeah.
and will satisfy the needs of domestic Chinese-based hyperscalers.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting aspects of the announcement, I mean, I think a lot of the media is latching onto this 1.4 nanometer, um, data point that was shared by their, High Silicon's, the head of High Silicon. But it's this idea that you're not looking at geometric scaling, you're looking at time scaling, right?
That's
So this
exactly
whole
it. We
tau.
stopped geometric scaling, or we stopped tying the numbers to geometric scaling about a decade ago.
Yeah. And
So,
so, yeah. And this is what I think is really interesting. Because, you know, a lot of people still think that Huawei just steals stuff. They're not innovative. They're not, you know, they're copying everyone else. I still hear this all the time.
No,
I
they
think
are a
it's
very
extremely
innovative company.
dangerous. Yeah, extremely dangerous to assume that these guys are a bunch of idiots. They're not. And they're also not constrained to legacy architectures, which you could argue the current semiconductor industry is stuck with a legacy right now. As you mentioned, you know, geometric scaling is pretty much now you're essentially stacking anyways, right? And so these guys are doing you know, 3D stacking and some novel. I don't know if you want to characterize a networking or interconnect to address what I guess tau, right? The reducing the signaling latency to get more performance, right? And so I don't know. I think it's they're looking at the problem more holistically and finding an alternative ecosystem and approach that are, you know, that would that ecosystem will support. But the question is, how long will it take for them to actually scale this thing economically and in terms of production as well, right? I think that's the big
you have
question.
to remember that there is a lot of innovation in semiconductors still to be had.
Yeah.
I mean, we traditionally had three main pillars of innovation, and those were the transistor design, which we've gone, you know, from 2D planar to 3D FinFET to, you know, gate-all-around technology now. There's materials technology, which continues to change. I mean, they're basically using the entire periodic table to come up with new solutions, and it varies by generation to generation. Matter of fact, that's one of the things that kind of tripped Intel up, starting about the 14 nanometer generation. But you also have the lithography technology, and that was the geometric scaling, really tying it to the gate length, which we stopped doing that. But it's still we are still scaling it, and it still impacts your design constraints in terms of how you design, you know, features within the chip. And that is it is still scaling. I want to make that clear. We are still scaling now with each generation, just not the same rate that we used to be. And now we have a fourth one, which you mentioned, and that is packaging technology, where we're stacking die, and we're doing things with the substrate. We're doing things on the base wafer. We're doing, you know, all kinds of very innovative things that are really changing Moore's law from millimeters squared to millimeters cubed. And Huawei is, to your point, Huawei is a very innovative company. They've always been highly competitive. And you have to remember that it's not just Huawei. It's a Chinese ecosystem. They have government support. They've got semiconductor foundries with SMIC and others over there. Right. So, I mean, it is an entire ecosystem that's supporting this. It's not just Huawei.
Yeah. And it's surprising that they're going to be targeting this chip or chips based on this process for the P90 smartphone, which I thought maybe they would go for something less demanding than the smartphone SoC. But yeah,
it's the bleeding edge. The smartphones are always on the bleeding edge, along with the PC processors, now the data center processors, and the AI accelerators. You know, all of those are pretty much on the bleeding edge at this point in time.
Yeah, that's true. So, Cerebras.
Yeah. It's
you got to have something to say about.
Oh yes.
Well, of course, you know, I've been a big fan of Cerebras.
First off, congrats.
First of all, congrats. Exactly. Congrats to the whole team. And their customers. They've really grown enough that the public market was very receptive to this IPO. Stock skyrocketed. It's fallen back somewhat since then. It's up a little bit more today, but bottom line is that they're the only guys in town that have wafer scale computing.
Yeah.
And there's good things and bad things about wafer scale. I think most people get the good stuff. You eliminate all the switching and all the rack-based architectures to get a really fast solution to market. But there's a couple of issues you have to deal with, and it's interesting to see how well Cerebras are dealing with those issues. So one of the issues is not enough memory. Okay, it's all SRAM, kind of like Grok, but instead of Grok, it's like Grok, right? So you get a lot more SRAM for the model to run on die. Yeah, I guess it's still die on wafer. But once you go beyond the size of the memory, you need to either offload the weights to a streaming device, primarily for training, and that's called Memory X. And then you also you have to go off chip more efficiently. If you think about, I/O is a peripheral problem, right? And pun intended. You have to use the shore line of the chip to send wires out for I/O. Well, what about all the chips that are inside the wafer? Well, there is no shoreline, zero. And so a lot of people complain that Cerebras is going to have a problem scaling wafer to wafer just because they don't have enough I/O bandwidth. Well, that's absolutely true, but there are ways around it. And Cerebras has done a pretty good job of getting around it. In fact, just last week, or was it yesterday? A week ago, they came out and said, "Hey, look, we're running Kimi 2.6. Well, that's a trillion parameter model, and they're doing it 1,000 tokens per second in enterprise trials right now. Well, that's about 6.5 times faster than the fastest GPU cloud, and it runs Claude Opus at 10x faster." So it's like, wow, they seem to have solved the problem. So I called Andrew Feldman, the CEO, and said, "How'd you do this?" And they said, "Well, we got some smart engineers and we figured out a way around the problems of not having enough memory." And what they did is they take each layer of the network and they parallelize at that level. So the inner layer communications aren't that demanding. So that gets them around the I/O problem. And since they're just having one wafer, one layer of the neural network on a wafer, they get around the memory problem. So it's pretty impressive, very impressive.
And you have to remember, there's still a lot of innovation going on. First off, it proves that there's not one size fits all for AI, because the models are different, the applications are different, the model sizes are different. So, I mean, that's going to lead to a lot of different architectures, especially for inference processing. But also the fact that, we're seeing a lot more innovation, and this is interesting because a lot of it was all around the models, and going to, especially towards transform, going from RNNs to CNNs to transformers, blah blah blah. Now we're seeing a lot of innovation in algorithms to run those models. Simple things that they can do and how they run those models that can speed them up 2, 3, 4, even 10x faster. Matter of fact, even working with some of the startups we've seen recently, and Nvidia, some of the stuff that they're doing, they just through that software layer innovation, they're being able to do a lot more than they ever have before. And I would suspect a lot of that's also coming into play with Cerebras as well. So I think that there's still a lot of innovation to be had there, and it's not just tied to the hardware. A lot of it's still in the software.
Yeah, and a lot of the models are. I mean, when you look at the size of the models that are being used in, let's say, edge AI type scenarios or inference in general, the smaller models. You have the whole tiny ML or tiny AI or smaller AI movement going on, and so there's that as well that I think changes the technical requirement situation for these accelerators, right? I mean, the demand profile is always changing, or the requirements are always shifting toward more for less. Actually, you get more out of less compute, thanks to innovations on model compression and the performance improvements that we're seeing with smaller models. So, and then for inference, a lot of the requirements are domain or application specific anyways, right? You don't need a world model to do certain specific edge functions or to support certain edge applications. So, yeah. And then also from a safety perspective, you're seeing a lot of isolation anyway. So it's nicer if you have a capable small model that you can deploy into a container and use the least amount of resources in executing that intelligence, if you will. So, no, that's cool. It's good insight.
And I think it's also important to remember that they're not just a one customer shop anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They have a large deal outside of G42 with AWS and with OpenAI. Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to pick two customers, those would probably be two of the ones you'd want to go after. And,
well, hyperscalers are the thing, right? I mean, if we're to talk about Nvidia's results that came out, the top hyperscalers are still 50% of their data center business, right? If not even, if you consider the neoclouds hyperscalers, which they really are, it's even more, right? They put hyperscalers in this weird bucket called ICE or something, ACIE. I don't even know what that stands for.
ACIE is for the neoclouds and enterprise and for
industrial, right?
Industrial, right? As well as the country specific data centers being set up, sovereign data center. That's also in the AICE bucket. But the thing is that's growing so fast now. NVIDIA is, I think, doing a good job of segmenting their revenue so they can show things that counter the narrative against them, which is they're just selling to five guys. They're saying, no. We're selling to major data centers for sovereign AI, for enterprise AI, and for the neoclouds. Yeah. And that's growing really fast, growing faster than the hyperscalers. And that to me, that was the highlight of the earnings call.
Oh, really?
It's growing faster for Nvidia. I don't know that it's growing faster overall. I mean, still the vast majority of the money, the CapEx that's going into spending for AI data centers is still by the hyperscalers.
Oh, yeah.
But it does point out that the hyperscalers and a lot of these, all the hyperscalers, if nothing else, they point to a key trend. And I think that's one of the key things people focused on. While, NVIDIA is facing more competition with, ASICs and everything else, as well as the hyperscalers doing their own silicon, there's not a single hyperscaler out there that's using one solution. So, I think it's really important to note that they're still scaling up NVIDIA. They're still scaling up, AMD. Now they're using Cerebras. They're using their own silicon solutions. They're scaling up multiple solutions for different AI platforms.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the other thing to recognize here with the hyperscaler bucket that they have is most of the growth is actually networking. So it's 3x.
InfiniBand was up 4x.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's scary. Yeah, InfiniBand. Yeah. And
can you imagine what NVIDIA would be if they were a memory vendor? and I kid you not when I say that. I mean, that's one of the other major things in May that we have to talk about, and the fact that now all three of the major memory vendors are in the $1 trillion
cap
market cap, gang, and they all hit it in the same month. So, I mean, that's huge. I mean, Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung are all, above $1 trillion market cap now, and because of memory. And as we look at memory, it's funny because middle of last year, we were thinking, there might be some oversupply and everything else. And then just things went crazy. And now we're looking at 2028 or beyond before we ever catch up with memory demand.
Yeah. And I think, and I always like to point out that valuations is one thing, revenues are another thing. But
it points to demand, and the demand is key, and that's what's really driving it.
Exactly, Jim. And
or the perception of demand is driving the valuation.
It's producing a longer cycle. So instead of a 3-year cycle that memory vendors have typically operated in, 2 to 3 years, now we don't know how long this cycle is going to be. Some people are saying it could be a 5-year cycle. and
Yeah.
so that reduces some of the risk on their stock prices,
Right.
as well as risk of an impending implosion. And I tell you, the financial analysts keep raising targets on these guys.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
They're all expected to basically double
Yeah,
again, and they've already tripled.
yeah, and I think that's also creating risk outside of the data center or the AI
Absolutely.
infrastructure segments, and that's where we saw that announcement. I think, or I don't know if it's a rumor. Apple talking to or inking some deal or coming close to inking an agreement with Intel for their foundry services, right? There's no indication on which product line or series Apple Silicon series product would be the first candidate, but I think that's where even the likes of Apple, which historically, or at least for the last couple of a decade and a half, has really dictated the conversation around advanced manufacturing. Now they're in a position or in a situation where they might have to diversify, right? Go back to the days before they committed to TSMC.
Well, I would warn you that you have to remember that they made a similar commitment to Global Foundries a couple of years ago and pulled out of it. So I take everything that comes out of Apple, especially in terms of new suppliers, with a grain of salt, because I've seen them just tank people and leave people high and dry with the crystal display, with the sapphire crystal displays, with the Global Foundries, with the foundry capacity. Apple can be your best and worst customer all at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah. But given the situation, I mean, do you think that's? Don't you think that the circumstances are different for them? I mean, they're getting crowded out a bit.
Yeah,
right?
but TSMC
if you look at
is adding a lot of capacity too. So, I mean, TSMC is adding a lot of capacity. They've got several fabs, one at least already in operation in Arizona, another one going up. Matter of fact, we know that Nvidia is going to be producing products here in the States as well at that facility. Amcor is adding additional packaging capacity, as well as TSMC in Arizona. So, I mean, there's a lot of capacity going in place. And, first off, I think it would behoove Apple to definitely diversify into other foundries. It's not a cheap process. It's a very complicated process to be able to support multiple foundries, but I think it's in their best interest to do that in the long run. But we'll have to wait and see. But I wouldn't count TSMC out by any means. And if Apple decides that they just want to continue on TSMC, they can. And I believe that they would if it comes down to it. It's so it'll be interesting to watch. On the other hand, though, Intel is doing fairly well. I mean, we expect to see by the end of this year some announcements around 18A and or 14A customers. And we already know that their packaging group is doing exceptionally well. They noted north of $1 billion in revenue just from advanced packaging. And that's out of Penang, Malaysia, and Rio Rancho, New Mexico. So, I mean, that side of their foundry is already cranking, and they won't break it out. But I believe they're actually already making money through packaging.
Yeah, and there's a lot of news that came out of Intel this month, right? I mean, one of which is Alex Katouzian is the new head of consumer and physical AI, right? Consumer computing and or client computing and physical AI. He's going to kill me for getting that wrong.
I'm going to tell him you got it wrong.
Oh my God! No,
for those
please don't. He works out.
Alex,
he works out. He's very buff.
He's very buff.
Yeah, he is.
For those who don't know, Alex has been with Qualcomm forever, and getting Intel capturing his talent and leadership skills was a real coup for Intel.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the Qualcomm team, and you had to say who's got the most talent
Mhm.
On the team, I'd say I've always thought it would be Alex, and sure enough, there he goes.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. He's a great guy, and all the best to him. He's got big shoes to. Well, he has big shoes to fill. Um, Maybe that's not the way of putting it. He has a very interesting challenge ahead of him,
He's got a challenge. He's walking
and
into a
he's
very
going to have
challenging
fun.
environment. Yes.
Yes, yes, and yeah, and okay. So let's give a little love to AMD. Anything on the AMD front? Anything else you guys want to talk about?
Just the fact that they and we're not talking financial. We're not financial analysts here, but
Yeah.
when they came out with their Q1 results or their Q4 results,
Who?
they kind of AMD. They kind of
Oh,
said
okay.
that
Yeah.
we're worried about memory and everything else, and I
Yeah.
kept looking at this and saying, guys, I'm not worried about AMD. I think they're cranking. And after seeing the Q1 results, obviously they've kind of revised that. They are cranking. They're doing very well. And the thing about AMD, and I think that this kind of gets lost in the whole AI discussion. A lot of times, it's not just about selling AI accelerators. They are doing
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
They are making headway with the MI 300 series and a lot of interest in the MI 400 series, but they are also very, very competitive, and I would argue, and continue to gain market share in server processors. So, I mean, they are no longer, I think, the second child in that race anymore. They are doing exceptionally well, and Epic is kind of favored in a lot of those AI platforms, and they continue to do well. They've got great partnerships with TSMC and Global Foundries. They're doing very well especially in desktop PCs. They're doing well in embedded segments. You got to remember that they invested heavily in all these
Yeah.
industrial embedded applications of Xilinx, and they continue to execute very, very well.
Yeah. And you know what? Speaking of embedded, one of the things that I'm noticing is the IoT for AI infrastructure is starting to turn pretty hot. Last year when we were at Cadence
Mhm.
Live, we heard a lot about digital twinning. Nvidia had this whole collaboration with Cadence, and I'm sure they had it with Synopsys as well, about instrumenting and modeling AI factories, or I mean, AI infrastructure, data centers, right? But you can only do that if you have sensor devices and embedded technology out there, providing that perception edge around that data center or for that data center. And so I don't know if you're noticing some movement there, but it's interesting to see that some of the the non-processor, because you mentioned the accelerator, we're seeing some of the IoT-ish chip
Mhm.
guys out there doing pretty well now.
Absolutely. I think we've turned the corner on that whole supply glut that we had, coming
Yeah,
off of COVID and
for
everything
node
else.
stuff. Yeah,
And we've always said this about IoT, and it extends to your point to the data center. Sensors are extremely important.
mm,
Wireless communications are extremely important. RF and analog solutions are important, obviously, as part of that. And then you also have power.
power.
Just managing power is becoming critical in just about every environment. So it is, we definitely see kind of the market turning and all of those guys doing well. Matter of fact, I still think that sensors is kind of the underrated area. And I think that we're going to see we've seen some transitions. NXP sold off some of their sensor products and technology. We've seen on semiconductor buying, we've seen TI buying, we've seen other companies buying, or ST buying. They bought the NXP stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to see a couple of major sensor vendors emerge out of this over the next
Yeah,
decade.
yeah, yeah. And then just going really quickly back to AMD. I mean, one of the things that I sensed in and have sensed in their reporting for the past few quarters is CPU and traditional data center stuff is really a key driver, not only of profit, but a significant driver of revenue as well. They put CPU in front of GPU. And the odd thing is also, with ARM during ARM's earning call, Renee, I think he mentioned their CPU pipeline has doubled since ARM Everywhere. And then we have Nvidia. What did Nvidia announced, or I think Colette mentioned that CPUs will be 20. Is it 20 billion?
20 billion.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think, Carl?
I think that I think Nvidia is kind of underrated by many people in terms of the strength of their CPU business. If you look at the Gartner server report, it shows ARM growing fantastically, and 80% of that growth is roughly is Nvidia, and so while Nvidia's two biggest competitors are both x86, Intel and AMD, the pole position for ARM servers is wide open, and it looks to me like Nvidia is winning it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would agree on the ARM side, but you also have to remember a lot of those ARM CPUs, are displacing what used to be other RISC-based CPUs for storage, for networking, for other platforms within the data center. So, but it is interesting as you start looking at the numbers for, the likes of Nvidia, AMD, Intel, et cetera. It is data center and then everything else.
Yeah, I mean that I think everything else is only like 7% of Nvidia's business. It's like insane.
Yeah, gaming is now everything else.
Everything else.
They didn't
even that.
Yeah, they didn't even bother talking about everything else. It's like, well, we have two parts of our business: hyperscaler and this ACIE thing, right? I mean, it's amazing how much things have changed in just 1 year. The other thing that so I tuned into Dell Technologies World. I mean, I think one of the things that came out of there that I thought was really interesting is they're pivoting toward warm water cooling. Lenovo kind of was one of the 2 or 3 pioneers in this particular area. And one of the things that's really interesting about warm water cooling, it uses facility water, so it reduces requirement for chillers, right? And that has pretty huge implications in how you design your data centers, which is interesting because now we have, generation over generation, the data centers themselves are on a, on an advancement or architectural diversification curve.
Well, and that was a big focus of open compute last year.
Yeah.
And, I just don't see the immersion taking off. And the warm water is much more appealing. And quite honestly, the direct-to-chip is still a much more appealing solution than I think immersion ever will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. You're right. And that's an area where you've got companies like Vertiv and Flex and Liquid Cool and blah, 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 that continue to innovate around there.
Yeah. And the other thing, AI workstation, more and more people talking about it. And Jim, remember you and I, when we were at COMPUTEX, was it last year? We did our little bit and we talked about how AI workstation is probably going to be that beachhead for enterprise AI, and lo and behold, we have OpenClaw that got everyone excited about putting agents locally on device, and there's a lot of talk about that, and I think the work that Cisco's doing in helping to fortify some of these open agentic frameworks on device is pretty interesting. I'm tracking that pretty closely, and I'm going to be at Cisco Live next week, so I'm going to be delving into that. And Jim, you still owe us that readout from your team on
Yes,
OpenClaw
we need to get Damien
and
on here
NemoClaw.
because he's been working on all of the he's been working on, first off, especially the different types of workstations, from a full-on workstation down to the mini workstations, and it really is going, the workstation market is going through a renaissance with AI because it is so much more efficient, or I should say
Cost
economical.
efficient. Yeah, economical.
To actually be working on those than sending everything to the cloud all the time. So that's going through a renaissance. And then OpenClaw just exploded everything, where everyone's, looking for new ways to create personalized AI agents, sometimes in a very dangerous fashion. But it is just exploding. I mean, it is amazing what's going on. So we should really have Damien and or Kevin on one of these calls to talk about what's going on.
It'll be interesting to see if Nvidia makes that a highlight next week at COMPUTEX.
I believe it will be.
I think it will. And Jensen was this morning announced significant increase in his investments in Taiwanese companies. And I think a lot of that's going to be around the PC. I think who has the best platform for running OpenClaw?
Yeah,
probably Nvidia.
Yeah, and we should probably highlight that in the fact that Nvidia, now that's basically printing money, should it has become one of the largest VCs in the tech industry. Matter of fact, I've got a tracker now, and like at least once every 2 weeks, there's a new announcement about an investment or partnership. Not always the financial details, but something Nvidia is doing with somebody, and it's ridiculous. I think I've got over 60 names on there already, and that's just over the past 3 years. It is insane, and they have I think Jensen's always had a preference towards the Taiwanese companies and working with the Taiwanese companies and raising up the Taiwan, visibility and tech ecosystem. But even beyond that, Nvidia is investing across the spectrum.
I think
from networking to EDA tools to models to you name it. It is incredible the amount of investment that this company is pouring back into the industry, through its success.
Yeah, and it's other income.
Yes. It's other income.
Which is interesting. We're seeing a lot of these players report other income, and these are their investments. They're reporting the unrealized gains on these investments that they're making in startups and such. So that was another interesting thing that came up in this last earnings season for the tech guys. I think it was Google and AWS that reported really big numbers. So, but then, anything else? Any things that you want to get off your chest and share with our audience?
I think
we covered a lot already, but
I am attending. Myself and Damien will both be at COMPUTEX, so we'll be reporting live from there. Awesome. Damien will also be at Automate, Industrial Robotics Automation Conference in Chicago in June. And then I will be at the Qualcomm Investor Day also in June. So a busy month. And Kevin will also be at Nebius Inflection. So it's going to be a very busy month for us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll be there. That's I have 8 events next month. So it's
8?
Crazy. 8.
Wow.
It's only 4 weeks. You're doubling down.
I don't know what happened.
There are a lot more events on our calendar. That's just the ones that we've committed to.
Yeah. Karl, any last mentions or sharing?
I think we should all watch what happens in Taipei. I think COMPUTEX, a lot of companies I work with are saying, wait till COMPUTEX, we'll tell you all about it. Mm-hmm. So I really do think that it will be the big event for all the NVIDIA wannabes to come up with new technologies, new announcements, new customers. So I think
miss out.
Bears watching.
And this is important because COMPUTEX traditionally was the PC show, the
PC
largest
show, yeah.
PC show in the world. Now, and now it is really transformed. And it's funny because at one time they tried to transform it into mobile, and that really didn't work well. But now there is a whole section, especially one whole floor that's dedicated to embedded computing. So industrial automation,
Yeah.
robotics, those types of applications. And we're seeing a lot more, especially since AI is so dominant in the data center. We're seeing more innovations and announcements and everything around the data center and AI at COMPUTEX as well.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Karl. This might be an AI PC, AI workstation year for COMPUTEX.
I think so. We'll find out till next week.
Yeah, we will. So, gentlemen, let's call it an episode. What do you say?
Yeah,
Karl's got to go. So, yeah. So
I gotta go.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate your viewership, and thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your knowledge and your insights. What?
I didn't get to use the slap icon, but we'll use it next week. I'll save it for that.
Did you invent it? Did you actually vibe code that?
I did, but we'll save it for the right time.
Oh, okay. All right. Send it to me, okay? Send it to me in a zip file. But hey, everyone, make sure to reach out and follow Karl Freund at Cambrian AI Research at www.cambrian-ai.com. He's also on Substack and Forbes, also LinkedIn. So connect with him, tap into his research. It's great stuff. And also reach out to and follow Jim McGregor and the Tirius research team, who are, the foremost authorities on everything that has a chip in it at www.tiriusresearch.com. And also, please subscribe to our podcast, which will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. Check out the audio version on Buzzsprout or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Also, subscribe to the Next Curve Research portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. And we'll see you next month. Take care, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Safe travels.